Jackson Mitchell, here we are at Graveyard Creek in Tallahassee, Alabama. You know, back in 1930, Jack, this was a wooden bridge. I can't, of course, that's before my time and years too, but you know, this bridge has had one improvement since I've been living.
Yes, I think it was during the Albert Brewer administration. I remember that he was seeking re-election after Lurleen Wallace had died. He was the lieutenant governor, then became governor for a couple of years, and he was seeking re-election. He came to Tallahassee, and he said in a speech at City Hall before a crowd of Tallahasseans, and if you folks in Tallahassee choose to vote for Albert Brewer for governor, I will widen the cemetery bridge.
But it's really the Graveyard Creek Bridge, right? Okay, but that's not what we're here for today. If I can look at the sun, you know, every time I look at the sun, I sneeze. A lot of people don't do that, but I do, and I feel like I gotta do it again.
Gesundheit.
Scat. But let's talk about it. A lot of people are putting their boats in down here at Graveyard Creek Bridge.
This is a beautiful area, and I hope that the people that, and I look across there and I see the for sale signs, the O'Daniel Realty for sale signs. Several lots are available across the way there. And a lot of this land has been purchased from Mount Vernon Mills and some of the other folks that own the property here. It would be so nice to see this developed into a lakeside area, but so many years has just laid dormant because the property was tied up. Isn't this beautiful?
Well, you know, Lake Martin did the same thing for many years before it finally developed, and then when it did develop, it started booming. I think one of the first steps here, and I've been saying this for year in and year out, is to have a nice boat launching ramp here in this area for the Tallahassee people.
Well, I think it's been brought up at a couple of council meetings, and the last report that I remember on a boat ramp here was the mayor had said that the purchaser of this property here where the boat launching ramp is now has been purchased by Mr. McKenzie, and he has said that he'd be glad to work with the city in helping provide a nice boat ramp for the public here.
Well, that's really not what we're here for.
No, we're here for another story.
Okay, but we've shown you the Graveyard Creek area here. We showed you the fishermen. We showed you the beautiful blue waters of Lake Thurlow here, and as we watch people going out fishing, it's a great fishing area, and it's located kind of away from the hustle and bustle of Highway 14 and the main traffic in Tallahassee. So really and truly, it's a beautiful area here in Tallahassee.
Have you ever jumped off this bridge? Oh, I see a lot of young people over the years swimming here and jumping, diving from the bridge.
Well, I'm afraid to jump from this bridge because when I was a young man, I guess the fear got put into me. There was a log floating underwater, and one Sunday afternoon, it was submerged. You know, halfway submerged, and we had some heavy rains, and it was submerged. And hope you catch a lot of them. Our boy jumped off about the very center of this bridge out here and he hit that submerged log and was severely damaged and injured. And so from that day on, my mama and daddy both said, boy, we better not catch any of you Brantley boys jumping off that bridge. And it kind of put the fear into me.
Going back to the story of the bridge, now the bridge we stand on now, Albert Brewer was not elected, but the bridge was eventually widened. George Wallace became governor, and this bridge is not the original bridge. Before that, there was a narrow bridge, and I understand before that,
about
another.
24 inches wider now than it was originally,
Yeah.
right? Okay, before that bridge was a wooden bridge, and we're going to tell you the story behind that wooden bridge when we come back.
Let me say something. Where we're standing, I see the serial number of this bridge, so if somebody sells it to you,
Be sure
check
to
it.
get the serial number, right? Tell me what serial number is.
It's BM 301-52.
52. Okie doke. Be sure and get that serial number on it, because it could be a stolen bridge.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go back to 1930, Jack.
A long time ago.
Okay, there was a young lady who was 20 years old by the name of Montez Sayers. And she was just so much in love with this fellow by the name of Harvey Pemberton. Both of them.
58 years ago.
Yeah. And he was 23 and she was 20. And they'd been sweethearts now since she was about 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so it come this Saturday afternoon and they wanted to get married. So they decided to go hunt up the preacher. And the preacher lived up around where Tubby Catonhead's old place was then. So they started through Tallahassee and they saw the preacher. His name was Mr. Y.O. Moore. Preacher Y.O. Moore. But back in those days, it's not like they are now where all preachers are rich. Back in those days, Jack, preachers had to take a sideline job. And so he was out hauling stove wood on a mule and wagon.
This thing shakes.
Yeah, don't let it bother you. So they ran up on him at about where right across from City Hall where the old company store used to be. They said, "Preacher, we just want to get married, something fierce like." And he said, "Now Montez, you and Harvey know that I'm not dressed right to marry y'all right here in the middle of this town."
You figured he needed to have on a tie.
Yeah. And he said, I gotta go deliver some wood over somewhere around the Riverside Heights area. And he said, "Now y'all just meet me down at the bridge and we'll talk about it down there."
Mm-hmm.
Well, they got this little old car and it had a rumble seat on it. So they jump in this car and come on down here and they get kind of tired of waiting. So they come back here to the Graveyard Creek Bridge where we at now. And by the way, this was a wooden bridge at that time.
That apparently was right after the water had been backed up because the Thurlow Dam had been built in the late 20s.
Okay, and this is 1930 now that we're talking about. So they met him right here on this bridge. And if we don't get killed by this traffic, we're gonna finish this story here. So right here, and he is stopped right in the middle of the bridge, and undoubtedly they didn't have near as much traffic as we got today, right? And so
Pretty heavy today.
they had with them Winfred Peoples at that time. She was a Tallahassee girl, and Clement Huey, who later became Clement Barnes, I understand. Well, Montez Sayers and Harvey Pemberton met right here in the middle of this bridge with the preacher.
Bridge.
With the preacher. And he said all the do-yous and I-do's to them. And he declared them man and wife.
Mm-hmm.
Sine die. No, just man and wife. And they got married right here on this Graveyard Creek Bridge. And we thought that was just a romantic story.
Unique and unusual. You hear about folks
Hey, I got another story to
married
tell
in
you.
unusual places, and it's happened right here.
They had been, she had been living with her daddy. He lived in a house over there, and that was their intention, is to go over there and continue to live with her daddy. By the way, she lived in that same house 62 years. From the time she was born to 62 years later, somewhere there in that neighborhood. Her and Harvey Pemberton lived there for many years together as Montez and Harvey Pemberton. But now they went on their honeymoon and they didn't have no money, and they went up here in a Carville. And if you want to know the house that they went on their honeymoon in, it's the log cabin that they're restoring.
Oh, is that a fact?
To make the museum out of. And that's where they spent the honeymoon. And so they just preserved their honeymoon cabin, and now it's going to be a museum up in Carville, right?
Historical monument.
What about that story, ladies and gentlemen? Did you have an unusual wedding or anything like that pertains to Tallahassee and the history of Tallahassee? We'd like to hear about it.
We sure would.
I thought that was something else, didn't you? I think y'all will enjoy it too. Good morning, you're watching the Coffee Break Show right here from Graveyard Creek Bridge in Tallahassee, Alabama.
Sine die.
Sine die. We use that word a lot, don't we? Wonder if somebody got that piece of metal, made some scrap iron or something out of it.
Yeah, looks like it. This old bridge shakes when the cars come across.
I rode across it on a bicycle before.
Did you?
You got one that wasn't charged.